The handcuffs bit into my skin as Sheriff Sheila yanked my arms behind my back. My neighbors watched from their porches, eyes wide with shock and fear. "Please," I begged, my voice barely a whisper. "I was just playing music in my garage. This is insane." Sheriff Sheila leaned in close, her badge gleaming in the streetlight. Her breath smelled of coffee and power. "Insane? No, this is the law, my law." She tightened the cuffs another notch, making me wince. The pain shot up my arms, but it was nothing compared to the humiliation burning through me. $1,000, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That is what breaking the peace costs in my county." As she shoved me toward her cruiser, I caught sight of Carla, my neighbor, recording everything on her phone. Sheriff Sheila did not notice. She was too busy making an example of me. That was when I realized something that would change everything. In a town where the law had become a weapon, my only defense would be something Sheriff Sheila never expected: friends in very high places. I moved to Pinecrest County 7 years ago, seeking peace after 2 decades in Chicago. The modest suburban neighborhood was everything I had dreamed about. Quiet streets lined with maple trees, neighbors who waved when you drove past, and enough space between houses that you could breathe without someone else's life crowding yours. My 3-bedroom home sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, with a 2-car garage that I had converted into a workshop. After long days managing the local hardware store, I would retreat there to restore vintage radios, a hobby that connected me to my late father. The soft glow of vacuum tubes and the gentle crackle of stations coming to life offered a comfort nothing else could match. Music always accompanied my work. Nothing extravagant, just classic rock or sometimes jazz filtering from a decent speaker system. Never after 10 in the evening, never loud enough to rattle windows. Most neighbors enjoyed it. Mrs. Keller, the retired piano teacher next door, would sometimes appear with homemade cookies, claiming the music reminded her of her youth. Even Mr. Peterson, known for complaining about the neighborhood children, would nod approvingly when passing by. That Tuesday evening began like any other. I was rewiring a 1956 Zenith transistor radio, Tom Petty playing softly in the background. The autumn air was cool enough that I had left the garage door half open, letting in the scent of fallen leaves and distant fireplace smoke. The flash of red and blue lights against my driveway came without warning. At first, I assumed there had been an accident nearby. I set down my soldering iron and stepped toward the entrance, concerned that someone might need help. Instead, I found Sheriff Sheila Martin standing there, arms crossed over her tan uniform. She was tall, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Despite the darkness settling around us, she wore mirrored sunglasses that reflected my confused expression back at me. "Is there a problem?" I asked, lowering the volume on my speaker with the remote. Sheriff Sheila did not answer immediately. She took her time surveying my garage, her gaze lingering on the speaker system, the workbench, the half-dozen radios in various states of repair. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the practiced authority of someone who expected immediate compliance. "That music can be heard from the street," she said. "That constitutes a noise violation under County Code 33B. I blinked, genuinely confused. "Sheriff, it is only 8:30 and nobody has ever complained. I have been doing this for years." Her posture stiffened. She removed her sunglasses slowly, revealing cold blue eyes that held no room for discussion. "The law does not operate on complaints alone. It operates on violations, and you are in violation." She withdrew a citation pad from her belt and began writing with deliberate strokes. The silence between us grew uncomfortable as neighbors began to appear on their porches, drawn by the patrol car's lights. $1,000, she announced, tearing the citation from her pad with a flourish. "Payable within 30 days to the county clerk." I stared at the paper in disbelief. $1,000 for playing Tom Petty at a reasonable volume before 9 at night. Sheriff Sheila's lips curved into what might have been called a smile on anyone else. On her, it resembled a predator's assessment of prey. "You can contest it in court if you want," she said, handing me the citation. "Though I would advise against it. Judge Harmon tends to double fines for wasting the court's time." She turned to leave, then paused. I recommend keeping that music off entirely next time the fine doubles. As she walked back to her patrol car, I noticed Mrs. Keller watching from her yard, concern etched across her face. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away and hurried inside. Sheriff Sheila's cruiser lingered in front of my house longer than necessary before she finally pulled away. The red and blue lights continued to flash against the homes of my neighbors, a warning more effective than any verbal threat. I stood in my garage, citation in hand, as the realization settled over me. This was not law enforcement. This was a demonstration of power, and for reasons I could not yet understand, I had become its target. I shut the garage door completely for the first time in years and turned off the music. The silence that followed felt nothing like peace. The county administrative building stood like a concrete monument to inefficiency, all sharp angles and tinted windows that revealed nothing of what happened inside. 3 days after receiving the citation, I took a morning off work to contest it. The $1,000 fine represented nearly a full week's pay, and the principle of the matter gnawed at me more than the financial burden. The clerk behind the glass partition examined my citation with practiced indifference. Her nameplate read Dorothy, though she offered no introduction. She typed something into her ancient computer terminal, the clicking of keys echoing in the sterile waiting area. "This is from Sheriff Martin's department," she said finally. "All noise violations issued by law enforcement must be contested through the sheriff's office directly." I leaned closer to the partition. "But that makes no sense. She is the one who issued the citation. How can she also be the one to judge whether it is valid?" Dorothy's expression did not change. "County policy, sir. Sheriff's department handles all noise ordinance enforcement and appeals." "Can I speak with your supervisor?" "He will tell you the same thing," she replied, sliding the citation back to me. "Sheriff Martin has discretionary authority in these matters." I left the building with the citation still in hand and a mounting frustration that threatened to consume me. On the steps outside, I encountered James Wilkins, a single father from 2 streets over. He looked as defeated as I felt. "Let me guess," he said, nodding at the paper in my hand. "Sheriff Sheila." "Noise violation," I confirmed. "You too." James laughed bitterly. "Unauthorized parking, in my own driveway. My son's friend left his car overnight when they were studying, and apparently that violates some obscure statute. $800. We exchanged stories, and a pattern emerged. Sheriff Sheila had been systematically targeting residents throughout our neighborhood with excessive fines for minor or even imaginary infractions. The citations always fell just below the threshold that would require judicial review. Over the next week, I began to collect more stories. Mrs. Fallon, a retired teacher, had been fined $500 for improper lawn maintenance when her rose bushes extended 6 inches over the sidewalk. The Thompsons received a citation for having their trash cans visible from the street on a non-collection day. Even Pastor Davies at the local Methodist church had been hit with a fine for excessive gathering during their annual picnic. What troubled me most was not just the arbitrary nature of these fines, but the fear they generated. Neighbors who had once chatted freely now lowered their voices when discussing Sheriff Sheila. Some refused to talk about her at all, changing the subject with nervous glances toward the street. When I returned to the sheriff's department to file my appeal, I was met with bureaucratic obstruction at every turn. Forms were mysteriously unavailable. The officer on duty claimed ignorance of the process. When I insisted on speaking with Sheriff Sheila directly, I was told she was in the field and unavailable indefinitely. After 3 hours of waiting, Deputy Collins, a young officer with an uncomfortable expression, approached me in the lobby. "Look," he said quietly, glancing toward the security camera in the corner. "You should just pay the fine and move on. Trust me on this." "Why?" I demanded. "Because Sheriff Sheila says so." The deputy's eyes narrowed. "Because this department processed over $200,000 in citation revenue last quarter. That buys a lot of new equipment and overtime. Nobody wants to see that revenue stream interrupted." As I drove home, The implications of what he had said settled over me like a cold fog. This was not random harassment. It was systematic. The sheriff's department had transformed itself from a law enforcement agency into a revenue-generating operation, with Sheriff Sheila as its CEO. That evening, I sat in my silent garage, staring at the vintage radios that now felt like forbidden artifacts. The citation lay on my workbench, a paper declaration of arbitrary power. The fury building inside me demanded action, but what could one person do against an entire system designed to protect itself? The answer came from an unexpected source. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I had not contacted in years. "Heard you're having trouble with local law enforcement. Call me, Marcus." Marcus Jennings had been my college roommate 15 years ago. We had lost touch after graduation when he went to law school, and I returned home to care for my ailing father. The last I heard, he had taken a position with the state government. I called him immediately, hope flickering to life for the first time in days. "You have got to be kidding me," Marcus said after I had finished recounting the events of the past week. His voice, deeper than I remembered but still carrying that distinctive Boston accent, sounded genuinely outraged. $1,000 for playing music in your garage before 9? That is highway robbery with a badge." I sat at my kitchen table, blinds drawn despite the early evening hour. The habit of caution had formed quickly in a neighborhood where patrol cars now seemed to appear with uncomfortable frequency. "What can I do, Marcus? The system here is completely circular. Every avenue of appeal leads back to Sheriff Sheila." There was a pause on the line, followed by the sound of papers shuffling. "Remember how I said I was working for the state now? What I did not mention is exactly what I do." "Which is?" "I am Deputy Counsel to State Attorney General Richard Coleman." My heart skipped. The State Attorney General, the highest law enforcement officer in the state, was effectively my friend's boss. "Do you think he would care about something like this?" I asked, trying to temper the hope in my voice. Marcus chuckled. "Richard has built his entire career on fighting corruption in local government. Small-town sheriffs running personal fiefdoms are exactly the kind of thing that keeps him up at night. Send me everything you have, the citation, any correspondence, names of other victims, and start keeping a detailed log of every interaction." "Will the Attorney General really look at this himself?" "Let me worry about that. Just gather the evidence." 2 days later, my phone rang during my lunch break at the hardware store. The caller ID showed a number with the state capital area code. "Is this the citizen with the musical taste expensive enough to warrant a $1,000 fine?" The voice was deep, measured, with the practiced cadence of someone accustomed to speaking in courtrooms. "This is he," I responded carefully. "Richard Coleman, State Attorney General. Marcus has briefed me on your situation. I have to say I find it deeply troubling." I stepped into the store's back office for privacy. "Thank you for taking an interest, sir. I was not sure anyone would." "Small injustices are still injustices," he replied. "And what you have described suggests something far more systematic than a single overzealous citation. I have authorized a preliminary inquiry into Sheriff Martin's ticketing patterns over the past 3 years." The Attorney General's tone shifted, becoming more strategic. "For now, I suggest you continue as normal. Pay the fine if you must. We can always seek restitution later, but do not tell anyone in Pinecrest about our conversations. Sheriff Martin likely has allies throughout local government." "What should I do in the meantime?" "Document everything. If you have security cameras, make sure they are recording. Keep track of patrol patterns near your home. And most importantly, connect me with others who have been targeted. Build the network quietly." After we disconnected, I sat in stunned silence. The State Attorney General himself was now involved in what had begun as a simple noise complaint. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. That evening, I paid the fine online, swallowing my pride along with the financial hit. The county payment portal even added a processing fee of $50, a final twist of the knife. But as I clicked Submit, I felt something I had not experienced since Sheriff Sheila first appeared in my driveway, a sense of purpose. Over the next 2 weeks, I meticulously gathered documentation. I installed additional security cameras around my property. I started a spreadsheet tracking every patrol car that passed my house, noting times and frequencies. I spoke discreetly with neighbors who had received similar citations, collecting their stories while being careful not to reveal my connections. Each night, I would compile my findings and send encrypted emails to Marcus, who passed them directly to the Attorney General's office. The evidence painted a disturbing picture. Sheriff Sheila's department had issued over 300 citations in our neighborhood alone during the past year, totaling nearly $250,000 in fines. What had begun as an individual grievance was transforming into something much larger, a legal counterattack backed by state authority. Sheriff Sheila thought she wielded absolute power in our small corner of the world. She had no idea that I now had the state attorney general in my pocket, quietly building a case that would shatter her kingdom. But power, even when abused, does not surrender easily, and Sheriff Sheila was about to demonstrate just how far she would go to maintain control. The patrol car appeared with increasing regularity outside my house, sometimes parked conspicuously at the corner, other times cruising slowly past my driveway. Always present, always watching. I documented each instance with timestamps and photographs, sensing the deliberate intimidation behind the surveillance. 2 weeks after paying the initial fine, I found another citation wedged beneath my windshield wiper. This one cited me for maintaining a public nuisance under County Ordinance 47C. The fine, $1,500. I took photos of the citation from multiple angles before touching it, then carefully placed it in a plastic sleeve, a precaution suggested by the Attorney General's office. The alleged violation was so vaguely worded that it could encompass virtually anything. The citation mentioned recurring disturbances, but provided no specific instances or dates. That evening, I called Marcus from a coffee shop 2 towns over, following our established protocol for sensitive conversations. "This is escalation," he said after I described the new citation. "She knows you paid the first fine without contest, so she is testing how far she can push." "What does Richard think?" I asked, referring to the Attorney General by his first name as Marcus did. "He believes she is building a paper trail to justify more severe action later. The pattern is consistent with other cases he has prosecuted. Create a record of infractions, then use it to support property seizures or arrests." My blood ran cold. "Arrests?" Marcus's voice took on a grim tone. "We have seen cases where sheriffs in small jurisdictions fabricated charges against individuals they wanted to remove from the community, usually targeting outsiders or people who questioned their authority." The following day, an official letter arrived from the Pinecrest County Safety Compliance Division, an entity I had never heard of previously. The letter stated that my property had been flagged for acoustic surveillance due to repeated violations of community sound ordinances. Effective immediately, my property would be subject to regular monitoring to ensure compliance. I scanned the letter and sent it to Marcus, who confirmed what I already suspected. The Safety Compliance Division was merely another arm of Sheriff Sheila's department, likely created specifically to target residents who had drawn her ire. The cameras I had installed captured the escalating pressure. Deputies would park across from my house during their shift changes, ensuring nearly constant surveillance. When I left for work, a patrol car would often follow me to the town limits. When I returned, another would frequently be waiting. Then came the confrontation at my mailbox. I was retrieving my mail when Sheriff Sheila's cruiser pulled alongside the curb. She emerged with that same predatory posture, mirrored sunglasses hiding her eyes even though the day was overcast. "Another citation arrived for you today," she announced, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "Failure to respond to official county correspondence. That is another $500. I maintained a neutral expression, aware that my security cameras were recording the interaction. "I responded to all official correspondence, Sheriff. Perhaps it was lost in transit." Her smile did not reach her eyes. "County records indicate otherwise. You know, these fines have a way of adding up. Some folks find it easier to just move away rather than fight the system. Is that what you want? I asked, keeping my voice steady. For me to leave? Sheriff Sheila leaned closer, lowering her voice. What I want is compliance. You moved here from the city, bringing your city ways and city noise. Pinecrest has rules, my rules. County rules, I corrected gently. Established by elected officials and subject to state oversight. Something dangerous flashed across her face. Keep pushing and I will bury you in paper. Every citation comes with a court date. Every missed court date comes with a warrant. How many days of work can you afford to miss? I met her gaze steadily. I hope you like paperwork too, Sheriff. She paused, studying me with new attention. You think you have found a way around me. You have not. This is my county. As she returned to her cruiser, I noticed Mrs. Keller watching from her porch, fear evident in her rigid posture. When Sheriff Sheila drove away, she hurried across to my yard. You should not antagonize her, she whispered urgently. She destroyed the Millers last year, endless citations until they could not pay their mortgage. The bank foreclosed and they had to move in with their daughter in Ohio. The Millers on Oak Street? I asked, recalling the vacant house that had remained unsold for months. Mrs. Keller nodded. Sheriff Sheila's brother-in-law bought it at auction for a quarter of its value. That night, I added this new information to my growing file. The pattern was becoming clearer. Sheriff Sheila was not merely abusing her authority for departmental revenue. She was systematically targeting homeowners, driving them out, and enabling her family to acquire properties at distressed prices. What had begun as a simple noise complaint had revealed something far more sinister. A calculated scheme of intimidation, financial pressure, and eventual property theft, all conducted under the color of law. As I sent the latest evidence to the Attorney General's office, I knew that Sheriff Sheila's noose was tightening, but so was ours. The knock at my back door came after dark. 3 short taps, then silence. I approached cautiously, peering through the blinds before opening it. Carla Winters stood on my porch, clutching a manila envelope and glancing nervously over her shoulder. Carla taught 4th grade at Pinecrest Elementary. We had exchanged pleasantries at neighborhood gatherings, but had never been close. Now she entered my kitchen with the caution of someone stepping into enemy territory. I saw what happened with Sheriff Sheila yesterday, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. At your mailbox. I offered her tea, which she accepted with trembling hands. It was not the first time, I replied. No, I imagine not. She placed the envelope on the table between us. She came after me last week, $500 for improper vehicle lighting. My perfectly functional brake light was apparently insufficient brightness, according to her measurement. I opened the envelope to find a citation nearly identical to my own in format, though for a different violation. May I keep this for documentation? Carla nodded. That is why I brought it. Mrs. Keller told me you might be doing something, that you might have connections. I considered my response carefully. The Attorney General had warned against spreading word of our investigation too widely, but we also needed more evidence, more witnesses willing to speak out. I am documenting cases where Sheriff Sheila may have overstepped her authority, I said cautiously. If enough people come forward, there might be grounds for a formal review. Carla's eyes brightened with the first glimmer of hope. Then I am not the only one. You need to talk to Benjamin at the hardware store. His food truck was shut down last month for improper permitting after he refused to provide free meals to the sheriff's department. That conversation marked the beginning of what we came to call the quiet resistance. With extreme caution, I began to connect with other victims of Sheriff Sheila's systematic abuse. We never met in groups larger than 3. We communicated through handwritten notes rather than texts or emails. We gathered evidence meticulously, citations, recordings, photographs, all funneled through me to the Attorney General's office. Within 2 weeks, we had compiled documented cases from 17 households, representing over 40 individual citations, totaling more than $30,000 in fines. The pattern was undeniable. Those who questioned Sheriff Sheila's authority became targets for increasingly punitive enforcement. During this time, I maintained a facade of defeat. I paid each new citation without formal contest. I kept my garage door closed and my house silent. I waved respectfully whenever a patrol car passed. The performance was necessary to buy time for the Attorney General's investigation to proceed. In my garage, now transformed into a legal war room rather than a music space, I set up sound measurement equipment borrowed from an acoustical engineer in a neighboring county. I documented the decibel levels of normal household activities, running water, closing doors, normal conversation, and compared them to the sound levels that had triggered my original citation. The results were revealing. My music, even at its loudest, had never exceeded the ambient noise levels of passing traffic on our street. Sheriff Sheila's noise violation had no scientific basis. Meanwhile, rumors of resistance reached the sheriff's department. Their response was immediate and harsh. Patrols increased throughout the neighborhood. More citations appeared on windshields and doorsteps. A deputy was stationed permanently at the entrance to our subdivision, recording license plates and stopping vehicles for random inspections. Carla called me in tears one evening after finding her car keyed in the school parking lot, a long, deep scratch that would cost hundreds to repair. There were no witnesses, no cameras in that section of the lot. Just a message, clear in its intent: stop resisting. Others reported similar intimidation, anonymous calls in the night, strange cars parked outside their homes, minor vandalism that never quite rose to the level of reportable crime. Through it all, we maintained our discipline. Every incident was documented and forwarded to the Attorney General's office. Every citation was photographed and cataloged. Every threat was recorded when possible. "We are almost ready," Richard Coleman himself told me during a rare direct call. "The evidence you have provided establishes a clear pattern of abuse of authority, selective enforcement, and possibly criminal intimidation. But I need you to remain patient for just a little longer." Patience was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Sheriff Sheila had escalated to posting a community safety bulletin on the county website, listing me by name as a repeated ordinance violator and warning neighbors to report any suspicious activities at my address. The legal counterattack was prepared in response, a formal cease and desist letter drafted by the Attorney General's office, accusing Sheriff Sheila of defamation and civil rights violations. It sat on my desk, ready to be delivered at the moment Richard gave the signal. The quiet phase of resistance was nearing its end. Soon, very soon, Sheriff Sheila would discover that her small-town power play had attracted the attention of forces far beyond her control. I knew that pushing back against Sheriff Sheila would have consequences, but I was not prepared for how quickly they would arrive. The morning after our small group had met to compile evidence, I was scraping ice off my windshield when a patrol car pulled up beside my driveway. It was not Sheila, but Deputy Collins, younger, less hardened, but unmistakably nervous. He stepped out and glanced around, checking to see if anyone was watching. His breath formed small clouds in the cold morning air as he approached. "Morning," I said, continuing to scrape the frost. My heart was pounding, but I refused to show it. Deputy Collins lowered his voice. "Listen, I am not supposed to be here, but you need to understand something. Whatever you are doing, whatever you think you are doing, you need to stop." I paused, eye scraper mid-stroke. "Is that a threat, Deputy?" "Consider it friendly advice," he replied, looking down at his boots. "Sheriff has connections, county judges, commissioners, everyone, people who cross her tend to have difficulties." I set the scraper down and faced him directly. "Is that what happened to the Martinez family? They had difficulties after questioning that property seizure last year." His face confirmed what I suspected. "I have said enough, just be careful." He backed away, returned to his vehicle, and drove off without another word. That afternoon, Carla called me, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "Someone keyed my car, right in the school parking lot between classes." My blood ran cold. Did anyone see who did it? "No cameras in that section," she said, "but the scratch spells out stop. This is not random vandalism." "Document everything," I told her. Take photos, file a police report. She laughed bitterly. With whom? The sheriff's department. She was right. We were fighting the very people meant to protect us. That evening, I received a call from the Attorney General's office. "We have reviewed your documentation," the voice on the other end said. "My team believes there is sufficient evidence to proceed with a formal investigation. However, we need you to remain calm and continue documenting. Do not provoke her. We are almost ready." I agreed, though provocation seemed unnecessary. Sheila was escalating on her own. The next morning, I discovered a community safety bulletin posted at the neighborhood entrance. My name was prominently displayed under the heading "Repeated Violator." No specific charges, just my name and address, a public marking. I photographed it and sent it immediately to the AG's office. "That was a mistake on her part," came the reply. "Defamation without due process. We go public soon." My lawyer called that afternoon. "We have prepared a formal cease and desist against Sheriff Sheila. This will serve as both warning and evidence. Once served, any further actions against you will compound her legal jeopardy." I sat at my kitchen table that night, blinds drawn, reviewing our strategy. The walls seemed to close in around me. Was this worth it? I could simply pay the fines, stop playing music, keep my head down. Many had chosen that path before. But then I remembered Mrs. Fallon, 82 years old, weeping as she described being humiliated over her unmowed lawn. I thought of James, working 2 jobs, having to choose between paying Sheila's unjust fine or buying school supplies for his children. No, this was not just about loud music anymore. This was about a community held hostage by fear. Someone had to stand, and through strange fortune, I had the connections to do what others could not. The cease and desist would be delivered tomorrow. The Attorney General's investigation was proceeding. My security cameras were recording everything. The trap was set. Sheriff Sheila had ruled through intimidation for years, but she had never faced someone who refused to be intimidated, someone with friends in places higher than she could reach. The state attorney general did not arrive with fanfare. There were no flashing lights, no media alerts, no public announcements. His black sedan simply appeared outside the county courthouse on Tuesday morning, flanked by 2 unmarked vehicles. If you had blinked, you might have missed it entirely. I watched from across the street, sitting in my car with the engine off. He emerged wearing a charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase that likely contained enough legal firepower to reshape our entire county. Tall, composed, radiating quiet authority, he did not need a badge or a gun to command respect. The law itself was his weapon. He nodded subtly in my direction before ascending the courthouse steps. We had agreed not to acknowledge each other publicly. Not yet. Within an hour, whispers began spreading through town. Something was happening at the sheriff's department. State officials had arrived with documents, meetings behind closed doors, raised voices. My phone buzzed with a text from Carla. "Is it happening?" I responded simply, "Yes." At 2:17 p.m., Sheriff Sheila was served with a preliminary misconduct inquiry, an official document detailing allegations of systematic abuse of power, selective enforcement, and possible financial improprieties. The serving officer was not from our county, but from the state capital. There would be no friendly cover-up. I learned later that her face had drained of color as she read through the pages. For perhaps the first time in her career, Sheila realized she was not the highest authority in the room. By evening, our small-town newspaper had caught wind of the story. The editor, long cautious about crossing Sheila, finally found courage in numbers. The headline appeared on their website: "Sheriff under state investigation, multiple misconduct allegations surface." That night, something shifted in our community. I stepped outside to check my mail, bracing for the usual glares or awkward avoidance from neighbors. Instead, Walter from 2 houses down walked over and solemnly shook my hand. "About time someone stood up," he said quietly. "My son got 3 tickets last year, 3, for a taillight that was fixed the same day." Mrs. Hendricks from across the street brought over a homemade apple pie. "For strength," she said with a knowing look. "We have all been waiting for this day." People knew Somehow, they knew I was involved. Not the details, perhaps, but enough to recognize that the wheels of justice were finally turning. Sheriff Sheila did not surrender quietly. The next morning, she appeared on our local radio station, voice steady but strained. "This is nothing but a political witch hunt," she declared. "Outside forces trying to undermine our community values and local authority. I have served this county faithfully for 12 years, and my record speaks for itself." But something had changed. Her words lacked their usual power. The fear that had amplified her authority was dissolving. By afternoon, cracks appeared in her support system. Deputy Martinez requested a transfer. County Commissioner Wilson issued a statement about taking all allegations seriously, a political speak for preparing to abandon ship. Then came the most surprising turn. Deputy Collins, the same man who had warned me to back down, contacted the Attorney General's office. He was willing to testify about directed harassment campaigns, about how Sheila targeted certain citizens who questioned her authority. That evening, an emergency town council meeting was called. The room overflowed with citizens, many standing against walls or crowding doorways. I sat quietly in the back, observing as years of suppressed frustration erupted into public discourse. My daughter was pulled over 8 times in 1 month. I lost my business license over a paperwork error that never existed. She threatened to have my children investigated if I contested the fine. One by one, people stood and spoke their truth. The council members, many long aligned with Sheila, sat in stunned silence. I remained seated, saying nothing. This moment belonged to the community now. The Attorney General had explained our strategy. "I will handle the legal battle. Your job is to create space for your neighbors to find their voice." As the meeting concluded, Mayor Thompson, visibly shaken, promised a full cooperation with state authorities and complete transparency in the process. Outside, beneath the stars of a clear night, neighbors who had previously avoided eye contact now stood in small groups, talking openly. Laughing, sharing stories. The atmosphere felt electric with possibility. My phone buzzed, a message from the Attorney General. "Phase 1 complete, prepare for tomorrow, the real work begins." I looked around at my community, awakening from its long slumber of fear. Sheriff Sheila still held her badge for now, but her true power, the power of intimidation, was already crumbling. Tomorrow would bring the storm. The state's report landed like a bomb on our quiet town. Released precisely at 9:00 a.m., its content spread faster than wildfire. 37 documented cases of wrongful citations. 12 instances of direct intimidation. Financial discrepancies suggesting fines had been used as a personal slush fund. The evidence was laid bare in clinical, irrefutable legal language. I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through the PDF on my laptop. Each page revealed abuses worse than I had imagined. Mrs. Fallen's lawn violation was there, but so were dozens of others I had never known about. A local mechanic fined repeatedly until he provided free services to the department. A restaurant owner cited for health concerns that disappeared after catering sheriff's events at no charge. By noon, the announcement came. Sheriff Sheila had been temporarily suspended pending full investigation. Her badge and service weapon were surrendered to state officials. The county would operate under an interim leadership appointed by the state until matters were resolved. My phone would not stop ringing. Neighbors, friends, even strangers who had heard of my involvement. I answered selectively, keeping my responses measured. "The law is working as it should," I told each caller. "This is not about me. This is about justice." At 2:15 p.m., the county administrator issued an emergency notice. All outstanding fines issued under Sheriff Sheila's authority were frozen pending review. Those already paid would be audited for potential refund. The sheriff's office went into lockdown. State investigators arrived with boxes and digital forensic equipment. Deputies stood outside, some looking shell-shocked, others seemingly relieved. By late afternoon, the dominoes were falling. Commissioner Wilson issued a statement distancing himself from any knowledge of impropriety. Judge Harmon, who had rubber-stamped countless citations, announced he would recuse himself from any related cases. Most surprisingly, Deputy Collins went public. Standing before news cameras, his uniform crisp but his face drawn with stress, he spoke plainly. I was instructed to target specific citizens, those who questioned authority, those who Sheriff Sheila simply did not like. I am ashamed of my participation, and I am prepared to cooperate fully with investigators. Town Hall could not contain the crowd that evening. People spilled onto the lawn, straining to hear through open windows. Inside, officials struggled to maintain order as citizens demanded answers. How had this happened? Who had enabled it? What would change? I sat in the back row, observing silently. The Attorney General stood near the side door, equally unobtrusive. We exchanged a single nod. The work was unfolding exactly as planned. Mayor Thompson, sweating profusely under the lights, attempted damage control. We had no knowledge, he began, but was immediately drowned out by angry shouts. You approved her budget every year. We complained, you did nothing. My family suffered while you looked away. The meeting devolved into a public reckoning. Years of suppressed anger found voice. I watched as our town's leadership withered under the spotlight of accountability. Later that night, the Attorney General and I met briefly in the parking lot of a closed gas station at the edge of town. It is proceeding faster than anticipated, he said, his breath visible in the cold night air. Her financial mismanagement was extensive. We have evidence suggesting she diverted at least $80,000 of citation money. What happens next? I asked. Criminal charges are likely, the civil suits will follow. But more importantly, he gestured toward the town lights in the distance, your community is reclaiming itself. I thought about his words on the drive home. This had begun as my personal fight against an unjust fine. It had transformed into something far larger, a town's awakening. At home, I noticed my hands were steady as I unlocked my door. The fear that had lived in my stomach for weeks had dissolved. In its place was something unfamiliar, a sense of power. Not power over others, but the power that comes from standing your ground. My security cameras still recorded. My doors remained locked. Sheriff Sheila was suspended, but not gone. Experience had taught me that cornered predators were most dangerous. Yet something fundamental had changed. I was no longer alone in the darkness watching shadows. The lights were on now, and an entire community stood in witness. This was not revenge, I reflected, as I reviewed the day's news coverage. This was justice in full daylight, and it was only just beginning. Sheriff Sheila did not surrender her throne quietly. 3 days after her suspension, her attorney filed a lawsuit against the town, the county, and the state. The complaint alleged politically motivated persecution and conspiracy to undermine duly appointed authority. She appeared on regional television, hair perfectly styled, voice steady as she proclaimed her innocence. I have protected this community for 12 years, she told the camera. This attack on my character is an attack on law and order itself. But her words fell flat. The evidence continued to mount. Financial records revealed patterns of selective enforcement against political opponents. Body camera footage emerged showing her instructing deputies to find something on targeted citizens. Former employees came forward with stories of intimidation and forced loyalty. The final blow came when state investigators discovered a hidden recording device in her office. On it were conversations with Judge Harmon discussing how to ensure maximum fines regardless of evidence. Just sign what I send you, her voice said clearly. We both benefit. 1 week after her suspension, Sheriff Sheila was arrested on charges of obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and misappropriation of public funds. The image of her being escorted to a state police vehicle, hands cuffed behind her back, appeared on the front page of newspapers across the region. That same day, I received an official letter from the county administrator. All citations issued against your property have been reviewed and expunged. Any paid fines will be refunded with appropriate interest. Simple words that represented the end of my personal battle, yet I felt strangely unsatisfied. This had grown beyond my own grievance. Carla called that evening. They are organizing a town hall about reform, she said. They want us to speak. Us, I questioned. Those who stood up first, those who created the path for others to follow. I hesitated. My instinct was to return to my quiet life, to finally play my music in peace without becoming a public figure. The system only changes if we engage with it, Carla continued. Otherwise, the next Sheriff Sheila is already waiting to take power. She was right, I agreed to speak. The community center was filled beyond capacity that Thursday evening. Faces I recognized sat alongside strangers from neighboring towns who had heard the story and come to witness. Television cameras lined the back wall. What had begun as our small local matter had captured regional attention as a symbol of citizens reclaiming power. When I approached the microphone, the room fell silent. I had prepared notes but set them aside. I am not a public speaker, I began. Until recently, I was just a person who enjoyed playing music in my garage after work, but I learned something important through this ordeal. Power unchecked becomes power abused, and silence in the face of injustice only guarantees more injustice. I spoke about my experience, then welcomed Carla to join me. Together, we shared not just our stories, but our vision for reform. Civilian oversight of law enforcement, transparent citation processes, body cameras with public access to footage, term limits for sheriffs. This is not about punishing one person, Carla told the crowd. This is about building a system that serves everyone equally, not one that serves power itself. As we concluded, someone in the back started a slow clap. It spread until the room thundered with applause. Not for us specifically, I realized, but for the possibility we represented. The possibility of change. In the days that followed, a petition circulated calling for fundamental reforms to county law enforcement. Signatures accumulated by the thousands. Neighboring communities began examining their own power structures. Local media, once cautious about challenging authority, now pursued investigative stories with renewed purpose. Sheriff Sheila's attorney attempted to control the narrative, issuing statements about her distinguished service record and commitment to community safety. But his words were drowned in the flood of evidence and testimony. What struck me most profoundly was how quickly fear had transformed into determination. People who had once hidden behind closed doors now spoke openly at public meetings. Those who had paid unjust fines without complaint now demanded accountability. She had ruled through silence, but once that silence was broken, it could never be restored. Standing at my window one evening, watching neighbors chatting freely in front yards without glancing nervously at passing patrol cars, I realized something essential. What we had won was not just justice against one corrupt official. We had reclaimed our community's voice. And that was something no badge or gun could ever silence again. 6 months passed. Spring arrived, bringing with it not just new leaves and flowers, but a renewed sense of liberty in our community. Sheriff Sheila was gone, not just suspended, but convicted on multiple counts. Her sentence, 5 years in state prison with no possibility of early parole. The department had been rebuilt from the ground up, with civilian oversight and transparent processes. Deputy Collins, having cooperated fully with the investigation, remained as a training officer, teaching new recruits about the boundaries of power and the importance of ethical policing. On a warm Saturday afternoon, I wheeled my speakers into the garage and set up my workbench. An old Philco radio from the 1940s sat waiting for restoration, a project I had abandoned during the months of conflict. I connected my phone, selected a playlist, and let the music flow out into the spring air. Within minutes, Walter appeared at the end of my driveway holding a 6-pack of beer. "Mind if I join you? Been too long since I heard good music in this neighborhood." He was followed by Mrs. Hendricks carrying a plate of cookies. Then the Martinez family bringing folding chairs. One by one, neighbors emerged, drawn by the sounds and the opportunity to gather without fear. Someone brought a grill. Another arrived with a cooler of drinks. Children played in adjacent yards while adults talked, laughed, and sometimes simply sat in comfortable silence, enjoying the music and the freedom it represented. Remember when this would have cost you $1,000, James said, gesturing toward my speakers. Worth every penny we did not have to pay, replied Mrs. Fallon, who had taken to walking the neighborhood daily now that she no longer feared arbitrary citation. As twilight approached, Carla arrived, glowing with purpose. She had transformed over these months, from a frightened teacher to a powerful community voice. 3 weeks earlier, she had won a special election for county council, running on a platform of transparency and citizen engagement. "How does it feel, councilwoman?" I asked as she accepted a drink. "Terrifying, exhilarating, necessary," she replied. "Someone has to rebuild the systems that failed us. Might as well be someone who remembers what those failures felt like." We sat together as darkness fell, small solar lights illuminating the gathering. The conversation turned, as it often did, to the costs and rewards of resistance. "I lost sleep for months," admitted James, "checking my windows, worrying about my kids." "My husband wanted to move away," Mrs. Hendricks added, "said it was not worth the fight." I listened, reflecting on my own journey, the anxiety, the security cameras I still maintained, the friendship with the Attorney General that had made our victory possible. "We forget sometimes," I said finally, "that systems of control work because they isolate us. They make each person believe they stand alone." Carla nodded. "The greatest weapon against justice is not power, but the illusion that power cannot be challenged." As the evening progressed, the gathering evolved into an impromptu block party. Someone brought out a guitar. Children caught fireflies in the growing darkness. For the first time in years, our neighborhood felt like a community rather than a collection of cautious strangers. Later, as guests began to depart, the Attorney General called. He rarely reached out these days, our official business concluded, but we had maintained contact. "The governor mentioned your case today," he said. "It is becoming a model for statewide reform legislation. They are calling it the Small Town Accountability Act." I smiled, watching the last neighbors walk home under streetlights. "Will it prevent the next Sheriff Sheila?" "Perhaps not," he admitted. "Power will always attract those who wish to abuse it, but it will give the next person who stands up better tools to fight back." After we hung up, I sat alone in my garage, the music now playing softly. I thought about the strange path that had led me here. Had Sheriff Sheila never targeted me with that first unjust fine, none of this change would have happened. Her attempt to silence one person had ultimately given voice to an entire community. I put away my tools but left the music playing as I walked inside. Through my window, I could see lights on in houses down the street, my neighbors moving freely in their own spaces. No patrol cars circled ominously. No arbitrary authority waited to pounce on imagined violations. The cost had been high, months of stress, threats both veiled and direct, the community trauma of confronting corruption. But we had gained something greater than we had lost, not just justice against one person, but a fundamental recalibration of power. And when the inevitable next attempt to silence us would come, because power never relinquishes control willingly, we would remember this. One voice, backed by truth and the right allies, could indeed shake an entire county. I turned up my music just a little, and for the first time in a very long time, I was not afraid.